Okay. So as I say, my name is Andrew McIntyre. I'm one of the Educational and Professional Development Managers here at ASB&B. I'd like to thank you for joining us today. If I can ask that you all mute your phones unless you wish to speak, as that will help us cut down on the background noise. So we have with us today Dr. Pete Kennelly from Virginia Tech, who chairs the development committee that established and runs the accreditation program. We also have Drs. Adele Wolfson and Anne Stock, who review applications for accreditation, along with Dr. Victoria Moore, who works with Pete to oversee the running and development of the assessment exam. So today's webinar is going to be divided into two sections. I'm going to give a very brief overview of the accreditation program, and then Adele and Anne will explain the program application and review process. And we're then going to have a question and answer session around this application and review process. And then Pete Kennelly and Victoria Moore will explain the certification exam, and we'll finish up with a second question and answer session and some concluding comments from the presenters. So as I said, today's speakers are going to be Adele Wolfson, Anne Stock, Peter Kennelly and Victoria Moore. While the presentation is going, you can submit questions to us either using the chat box in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen or by sending an email to education@asbnb.org. During the question and answer session, we will also be able to have some discussion. If you unmute your phones, you can just say your question. And also, if you have questions after the webinar, you can reach out to us at that email address. We're going to be recording this webinar, and a recording will be made available online shortly after the broadcast. But we'd ask that you don't ask questions during the presentation to allow the presenters to get through their discussion. So to give you a quick overview of the accreditation program, it was launched in the fall of 2013, and we're just finishing our third round of accreditation reviews. And so after this round of reviews, we will have 30 accredited programs and departments. In April of last year, we ran our first certification exam, and I should say that at that point we had far fewer schools accredited. We had around 150 students from accredited schools sit the exam, and 46 of those students graduated with certifying degrees. And we're now getting ready to administer the next exam across these 30 accredited departments. The next deadline for applications for accreditation is March 15th, and these deadlines come round once every 6 months, and so after March 15th, the next deadline will be October 15th of this year. For those of you that are interested in submitting an application, there's extensive information available online at our website, asbnb.org/accreditation. And on the website, you'll find guidelines for application, some frequently asked questions, and several sample applications, along with sample questions from the exam. And even if you've looked at this previously, I recommend that you go and look back over the website before you begin to work on your application, as we're continually working to improve this application process. Okay, so now I'm going to turn over control to Adele.
Thanks very much. So again, I want to say good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are, and add my welcome and thank you for your interest in ASB&B accreditation. As Andrew says, I'm Adele Wolfson. I'm at Wellesley College, and I chair the subcommittee on program accreditation. As you know, if you want your students to have their degrees certified, your program first must be accredited. So that's one of the first reasons to think about getting your program reviewed. But in addition to that requirement, we think that program accreditation provides a number of benefits to you and to your institution. Like any self-assessment, it's an opportunity for you to evaluate your major, including all the elements that we're going to talk about, and our guidelines and our rubrics provide the standards that you can use for that. Also, like any external review, it gives you ammunition to go to your administration in requesting resources such as faculty lines or instrumentation with a strong argument that these are required by your professional organization. And it helps to establish or document quality for a whole range of audiences. It gives you that leverage in looking at prospective students for you as a program, and also outplacement for your students or your graduates in their internship, summer programs, workplace, and graduate school. So on the next slide, you can see that we evaluate 3 broad areas: the curriculum, the faculty, and the infrastructure of the institution. And in every case, when I say we expect something, that means that we want to see specific evidence of its existence. Please note that we know that the programs applying to us are from a really wide range of institutions, from small to large, from PUIs to R1s, from those programs that are housed in chemistry departments or biology departments, or those that are freestanding B&B departments or programs. And we do not imagine that there's going to be a single ideal model of a program for accreditation, but we do have some bottom lines when we're looking at these standards. So looking at the curriculum on the next slide, we don't have a set of courses that we look to check off, but we do consider whether or not the core concepts in biochemistry and molecular biology are introduced, and then whether these are developed through a sequence of courses. That usually means that students need to take multiple courses in both biology and chemistry as well as biochemistry.
Hey.
We've laid out what we mean, what we consider to be the minimum number of hours of experiential learning, which usually means lab courses. And we expect your curriculum to address the skills named here, namely teamwork, safety, communication, and ethics in concrete ways. Looking at the next slide in faculty, we've stated that we expect at least 3 faculty members to be affiliated with the program, and that the faculty should represent the range of expertise needed in B&B. We expect that the institution will provide opportunities for professional development, such as sabbaticals, funding for travel to professional meetings, events, or programming to improve and update teaching methods. And then looking at infrastructure on the next slide, moving to the next slide, we want to see data on the number and capacity of classrooms and labs for teaching and research, as well as other facilities. The commitments to diversity and to advising need to be more than just lip service. And research opportunities for students, whether at your own institution or placement elsewhere, is essential. I'm now going to turn this over to Ann Stock for more details on the application and review process.
Hello, I'm Ann Stock at Rutgers University, and welcome to all of you. So we've already covered a little bit of this in the overview. There are 2 deadlines per year in October and March, with the next deadline being March 15th. We ask you to review all guidelines and make sure to be diligent about including all items on the checklist. And the website is a really valuable tool for this, and we encourage you to consult it while preparing the application. We believe that the sample applications are especially useful guides, and while we recognize that the content will differ greatly from one institution to another, the samples give an example of the level of detail that we believe are appropriate. We ask that you use the templates as directed, and it's a good idea to double-check their appearance in the final application. The applications are reviewed by a team of faculty and industry representatives. You can find the names of the team members listed on the accreditation website page under the Contact tab. So there are 4 potential decisions that can be made on applications. Approval for 7 years is given if the program is deemed appropriate in all critical categories, although there might be specific small numbers of areas of relative weakness. The application can be approved provisionally for 3 years, and this decision would apply to new programs undergoing major revisions in curriculum or faculty, or programs with a small number of students where we want to see a track record of producing graduates. This decision could also apply to programs with a few critical areas of weakness that need to demonstrate improvement. An application is deferred if it is missing critical information in one or more areas, and these deferred applicants are encouraged to submit the missing information at the next application deadline, and they have a period of 1 year from the deferral for submitting that missing information before they would need to resubmit as a new application with a full package. And the final category is denied if the program has critical weaknesses that prevent approval. On the next slide, we'll cover just a few frequently asked questions, where the first one is, if our program is not granted accreditation, what steps can we take to appeal the decision? Unsuccessful applicants can resubmit a revised application at the next convenient deadline. The resubmitted application should include a letter briefly outlining specific responses to the prior evaluation summary. The next question is, can a department request accreditation for multiple tracks or programs within a single application? The answer is yes. In this case, separate information should be submitted for each track. And I will also take this opportunity to address an issue that we frequently encounter. If accreditation is being requested for a single track within a department, the application should provide information specific to students in that track, not for students of the entire department. So we're really interested in evaluating a program rather than a department if it's the program that is to be accredited. And finally, a question about whether 400 or more contact hours of experiential learning for students is absolutely required, and the answer is yes. So you can find a very large number of frequently asked questions on the website. All of these have answers. There are also another list of questions that relate to the last webinar with complete answers, and we will be posting a set of written answers to the questions that come up during today's webinar as well. So I'll pass this back on to our chairperson.
Okay, thank you, Anne. So we're going to take questions now related to the accreditation side of the process. I'd ask that if you want to speak your question, that you first of all click on the raise your hand button on the top left-hand corner of your screen, and we'll go through these one at a time so that everyone's not speaking at once. Also, if you have questions, you can type them into the chat box in the bottom left-hand corner. Okay, so we have a question from Esther Biswas.
Good afternoon. My name is Esther Biswas, and I'm calling from Thomas Jefferson University in Philadelphia. I have a question regarding site visits. Are there site visits that are associated with the accreditation process?
Not at this point. This is Adele Wolfson speaking. No, we are evaluating solely on the basis of the written material submitted.
All right, thank you.
We also have a question from Jeff Lawton, who asks, is there a list of minimum requirements for the library resources in support of the B&B program?
We have not put together a list of minimum requirements. Schools in general have just been listing for us what they have available to them, and we have commented back if we think that that's a limited list compared to what we would expect, but so far not. We're as everybody knows, I hope, we are still developing this program of accreditation, and if it seems like that would be an important thing to have, then we can add it to our list of things to work on.
We also have a question from Paul Black, who asks for some clarification of the 400 hours of experimental learning and what this includes.
We generally have interpreted that to mean course labs, so labs associated with courses, and in some cases, some research experience has been included in that.
And just as a point of clarification, if a course is divided between lecture and laboratory, we would need estimates of the breakdown between those two components, and only the hands-on laboratory hours count into the category of experiential learning.
This is Peter Cannell, and I just want to amplify a couple of things. We're talking about how many hours the students actually spend in the hands-on part of the activity. We're not talking about credit hours. We're talking about hours in terms of participation, and we're talking about total STEM hours. So this includes physics labs, micro labs, activities like that. It can include undergraduate research if it's documented appropriately. And we arrived at this number basically by surveying a large number of programs to see what they already had in place, and 400 seemed to be the threshold for those programs.
And we have a follow-up question from Mary Anderson about that, asking why only some aspects of research were included and not everything.
I'm not sure what you mean by some aspects. STEM is pretty broad.
Okay.
I think that the question had to do with research as opposed to coursework. And I think that the answer to that is that we do include research in the 400 hours. It's just that we would like to see that that there are actual labs associated with courses and that research is not substituted for all of that.
Okay, thanks. We also have a question from Franklin Outen, who asks, for new programs, how many graduates are needed to establish a track record? Is there a certain number of semesters or years required before application?
I don't think that we have a specific number of graduates. It's more that it should be commensurate with the size of the department that it's housed in and or the institution. So, you know, if there's 5 students a year who are graduating in BMB, that's fine. If it's a small school, that seems rather small for a major state university. The number of years we would like to see, before we give full accreditation, I think that we would like to see a full set of 4 to 5 years of graduates, but we certainly would be happy to do provisional, even at the first when the program is first being set up, if it seems like a strong program.
Okay. Sorry, Pete, do you have something to add?
No.
Okay. So James Staros asks, with respect to the requirement for separate information for each track, would a BA and a BS in BMB that share a large majority of requirements have to be treated separately, or could the majority be handled together with the differences enumerated separately? So is there a need to separate these out completely, or can they be brought together in the application?
The answer is that wherever the information overlaps, it can be dealt with together. But where there are separate pieces of information, as in specific requirements or numbers of students on one track or another, that would need to be dealt with separately.
And this is a practical issue of avoiding confusion when we're trying to read your evaluations, read your applications. I think we've been through 3 rounds now, and I think we've found that having good delineation is really important when people try to put more than one element into their application.
So again, just as a little bit of clarification for that, if you're asking for accreditation of individual tracks, we have to have complete information for what is covered in each track. There can't be overlap in satisfying the requirement. So wherever the 2 tracks differ, we need that information separately.
But certainly the major part of the application having to do with faculty qualifications, institutional support, et cetera, that can all be common.
Okay. I have a follow-up question from Mary Anderson, who asked if you could expand on what documentation is required for undergraduate research.
We would like data on how many students or what percentage of students are involved in undergraduate research and which faculty members are supervising them.
Okay.
And
Anne wanted to add to that.
Many applications have also included, for instance, if it's a small number of students, the titles of research projects, et cetera, that can be very helpful in evaluating programs within chemistry departments in particular to know that there is a sufficient biological component to give students access to true biochemistry research rather than more traditional forms of chemistry.
And this is Peter Kennelly. I mean, at most schools, undergraduate research, you register for hours, and there is a ratio of contact hours to credit hours involved. For schools that have a capstone project component, students have to register for that, and there should be within that capstone project some clarification, some requirements for how many hours the students will be spending to through those projects.
As a follow-on to that, William Marsloff has asked if summer research experience will count towards the 400 hours, even if there's no coursework involved in that summer research.
So we have really not been asked that question before. Frankly, even though we're having this discussion about the 400 hours, I can't think of very many programs that have not lived up to that, because as Pete says, it includes experiential learning or labs in essentially all the STEM disciplines, and a student who's doing BMB tends to have done that. We've been thinking about undergraduate research as another important component of the program beyond the coursework and the experiential learning associated with those courses. So the overlap between undergraduate research and lab courses has really not been an issue for us to this point. I think that if you had a program that was short on lab courses for one reason or another, and you wanted to argue that your students were getting that experience by doing summer research, you'd have to show that every student was doing it, but you could make such a case.
I think Adele's last point there is really critical to this. The 400 or more contact hours needs to be a requirement of the program. It can't be something that some students get as an elective or an opportunity that is not something required of all. And so typically summer undergraduate research would fall into that category of being something that's done on an individual basis.
Okay. We also have a question from Mary Anderson, who asks if there's any way to have applications pre-reviewed before submission.
We are not doing that at this point, no.
Okay, so I think we'll take one more question and then we'll move on to the second part of the presentation, just in the interest of time. But any questions that have not been answered so far, you can either send us via email or via chat, and we'll try and address them either at the end of the webinar or in follow-up contact with you later on. So the final question is from Franklin Oughton, who asks, what qualifies a faculty member to be affiliated with the program? Is it teaching? Is it mentoring? Is it having undergraduates in their laboratory for research, and so on?
The answer is yes. All of those things qualify a faculty member to be affiliated with a program. However, we do have a request for indication of primary faculty who are participating in the program who would be doing a combination of all of these things. Usually if faculty are serving as affiliated members for research but not actively teaching and mentoring in a program, they are listed as affiliated faculty rather than being counted as primary members of the program. That definition obviously is going to differ a lot from institution to institution in large and small programs.
Okay, that's great. I think in the interest of time, we'll move on to the second half of our presentation, which is going to be delivered by Peter Kennelly and Victoria Moore, who are going to be co-presenting on the accreditation exam.
Okay, so this is Peter Kennelly. You get me first. I'm the head of the biochemistry department at Virginia Tech. And as we've contemplated and developed this program, we made a strong commitment to the idea that decisions would be made on the basis of evidence, that this would be an outcomes-based program, and that we wanted to recognize students for performance rather than simply having matriculated through a program that happened to have a plaque on the wall that said it was, approved by some professional society. And we think that this will add tremendous value for the students as people come to learn that having that credential reflects performance, reflects substance rather than form. The flip side of that is the minute you talk about actually thinking about outcomes is then you have to test. You have to assess. And obviously that's a challenge. This is programs being developed, run, improved, administered by volunteers across the board with the help of a couple of talented staff at ASBMB. As Adele mentioned in her presentation, we think that institutionally, one of the things that the assessment examination offers to your programs is an independent assessment by a national body of scholars that's independently designed, independently scored, and I don't know about you guys, my institution is getting ready for their next SACS accreditation. This is something that we find really valuable to have. The exam is built around 4 core concepts and some learning outcomes that are available on the website, and our desire is to test skill and knowledge rather than memorization. And so we eschewed a multiple choice format. The exam is administered in April. Its length is 1 hour. It's designed to be fit into a single course period to be fairly seamless for the faculty involved. After last year's exam, we surveyed the schools that participated and asked them if they wanted a longer exam period, and we got back a vast majority of responses indicating that they liked the hour. The number of questions is generally 12 to 15. The majority are free response, although there's always the issue of coverage versus depth and compactness time. The 4 core concept areas that we're trying to address are information storage and transfer, macromolecular structure and function, energy and metabolism, and the scientific method and quantitative analysis. All of this is being done, as I say, the original group of people was 9 who developed the first draft of this program. We now have teams of people. Adele and Ann are key members of the group that are reviewing applications. Vicki is a key member of the group with various sub-teams that are developing questions and answer keys. I work with Diane Dean with the group of people who have to, who are involved in scoring the exams. And so there are a lot of your peers that are involved in this, and we hope that if you're interested, you'd perhaps get involved in helping us carry this program forward. One of the things we've done is that there's been a major effort under the aegis of the ASBMB called the RCN UBE project on core concepts. There have been workshops, about 50 of them, across the country over the last 4 years that have with small groups of about 800 faculty to date. And so we've tried to draw from the community, informing our picture of what a biochemistry student should know and therefore what we should try to assess. And I think it's time for me to turn it over to Vicki.
So hello, this is Vicki Moore from Elon University, and I'll be covering exam administration and scoring. Exams are scored independently by 3 evaluators using a common key, and we calculate inter-rater reliability to ensure that the score allocated for each question is appropriate. We use a 4-point scale for grading, with 0 indicating there was no response recorded, and then 1 to 3 representing different levels of proficiency. Scores of 2 or 3 represent student responses that are acceptable for accreditation, and on the next slide I'll talk about how we define proficiency. So on the exam, students need to demonstrate proficiency across multiple concept areas, as well as Bloom's levels. So the cutoff for the 2014 exam was proficiency on 80% or more of low-level Bloom's questions. So that is a score of a 2 or 3 on those questions, and 62% or more of high-level Bloom's questions. Students who met these scoring criteria were certified either as proficient, or if they scored highly proficient on a majority of the portion of the questions, then they were certified with distinction. So on the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about exam administration. For the administration of the exam this year in 2015, there will not be a fee. However, starting in 2016, a cost of $25 per exam is anticipated. And this cost covers planning and evaluation, scoring, bringing together the teams of people who connect the exam, as well as staff support at ASB&B and insurance. So the 2015 exam will be paper-based, and it is hoped that at the beginning of 2016, an online testing service will be used. So there's always the question of who do we administer the exam to, juniors or seniors, and the exam itself is aimed specifically at juniors and seniors based on how most programs are structured. And whether your program administers to juniors, seniors, or a mix of both is solely at your discretion. Since one of the benefits of access to the exam is that it can serve as an assessment tool for your program, administration should be to your entire student population. And our experience indicates that there's no correlation between performance on the exam and GPA. So, and finally, on the next slide, I'll give an overview of the resources available to help you preparing for the exam. So there's several resources available. There are sample questions on the Accreditation website, and it's hoped that these will aid both students and instructors in becoming familiar with the format. Learning outcomes are also posted. Keep in mind that they remain work in progress, so check back regularly. And additionally, recent publications in BAMBED summarize the output from the RCN UBE workshops that Pete just mentioned. And we can always use more volunteers, and so, of course, helping develop or score future exams will make you very familiar with the format. And so I'll pass this back to our chairperson so we can have questions about the exam.
Okay, thank you, Vicki. As I say, as before, if you have a question, you can either email it to us at education@asbnb.org. You can type it into the chat box in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, or you can speak your question aloud, but I'd ask you that if you do this, you first of all raise your hand using the button in the top left-hand corner of your screen. So we have a couple of questions already. The first question is from Michael Doherty, who asks, is the examination available only to accredited programs, or can it be used diagnostically by programs which are not yet accredited?
The answer is it's only available to accredited programs.
Okay. We have a question from William Margloff, who says that they have a very mixed experience with the B&B GRE exam, and they don't want to recommend students to take it since there's such a diversity in what's covered at different schools. Do you see this as being a problem?
Well, obviously, there's a continuous spectrum, and so some programs may experience difficulty. I can say at Virginia Tech, we have the same experience with the GRE exam. We think our students do very poorly on it. We don't recommend they take it. What I can tell you is that the questions have been developed by biochemistry faculty and molecular biology faculty, so other folks in the trenches. And so we've only been through one round. The initial feedback we got from participating schools was that they thought we had done a reasonable job in terms of coverage.
Okay, and Stephen Mills asked, can students retake the exam?
No, students aren't allowed to retake the exam. They get one shot at it, and so that might help the decision as to whether a student takes it as a junior or a senior.
Yes, and we've done that because if schools are having seniors take it, they obviously have no second chance as they complete the program. And so to assure equity across the board, we've just instituted a rule, one bite of the apple.
Okay, so we have a question from Franklin Oughton regarding the student chapters, which are undergraduate associations associated with ASB&B at individual schools. And he asked, is there a plan to offer the exam for either a discount or for free to students who are members of the student chapters, formerly known as the UAN?
Presently, no. And I would just point out, for those of you who don't have student chapters, that students participating in those chapters get access to travel awards and a lot of financial incentives already from ASB&B.
Okay. I also have a question from Jeff Lawton, who asks, is there a minimum pass rate required for the exam in order for the accredited B&B program to maintain accreditation?
And the answer to that is no. We don't want this to become an SOL situation. We don't want to incentivize poor practices. What we want is to offer you an opportunity to take through this examination a look at how your students are doing and a look at how your program is going. We want to be a partner with you, not a referee.
Furthermore, there is no question within the application package that even gathers information on the results of the exam.
But in fact, we do ask about how you assess your program, and this would be a way of demonstrating that you are using a reliable assessment method. Not the pass rate, but just the fact that it is being used and the results examined.
Okay. Are there any more questions that people would like to ask? If not, I want to remind everyone that if you have any questions after the webinar, you can reach out to us at education@asbnb.org. You can also look at the website. There's a number of very useful resources regarding accreditation, including example accreditation applications and some exam questions, along with a list of frequently asked questions, and that's at asbnb.org/accreditation. If you're going to be coming to the ASB&B annual meeting in Boston next month, we will be having an accreditation workshop where we can also answer your questions there. You can also follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, and at LinkedIn. And finally, of course, I'd like to say that in order to get the most out of the accreditation program, I recommend everyone become a member of ASB&B. So I'm going to go over all the questions that were asked today on chat or via email and draw these together, and we'll make these available to you. We're also going to make a recording of this webcast available online shortly after we finish. If there's no more questions, I'd just like to say thanks to Del, Pete, Vicky, and Anne, and ask if they have any concluding remarks to say about the accreditation program.
I mean, the thing I'd like to say is that we hope that this is something that really benefits the schools and the students that participate. And this came from the community. This didn't come from, some executive director of an organization. This came from folks like you.
And it also is being carried out by folks like you, so please be patient with us.
Okay, if there's no more questions, I think I will finish up. Again, thank you to our board.
One more.
Oh, hang on, maybe a last-minute question here from Franklin Oughton, who asks, will ASB&B track graduates from accredited programs to determine if accreditation conveys any employment benefit or a benefit when the students go on to graduate school?
The answer is, in an ideal world, we would love to, but practically speaking, that's probably going to be really difficult. Okay.
With more questions, we'll finish up. Thank you very much to everyone for joining us, and thank you to our speakers. And I hope you have a great weekend.